You're listening to the Build Your Business podcast, powered by Turnkey Coach, where we help business owners find freedom over fear.
I'm Matt Reynolds.
And I'm his brother, Chris Reynolds.
Join us as we help build your business and move from fear to freedom together. You're listening to the Build Your Business podcast. I am your co-host, Matt Reynolds, here with my little brother, Chris. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
It's been a couple weeks since we recorded. We saw each other in Chicago a couple weeks ago for the board meeting, and then I immediately went off to Mexico for my 25th wedding anniversary. For those of you watching on video, you can see how tan my face is and freckled, and been in the sun a lot. Had a great vacation, very relaxing. I've now trained 14 days in a row. No breaks.
Excellent.
I've eaten really clean, really backed off alcohol. Sleep has been great. So the crazy thing about that is that, you know, training and sauna and cold plunge, I do all that stuff every day. It takes about an hour and a half to do all that stuff for me. When I'm in the midst of work death mode, I'm like, I don't have an hour and a half to give. And then I realize that when I do give the hour and a half, all the other work is way more effective and more efficient. And
There's
so,
no question. It is definitely that way. If you can convince yourself to do it, the rhythm of it is just, everything is better.
Yeah. So things are going great. Board meeting went great. Really happy with business right now, and things have started to slow down. I don't have any travel on the schedule right now, which is the first time that's occurred in years. I'm sure something will pop up, but it's nice because going into summer, the pool's about to open, and you could just kind of hit a good stride of like a regular rhythm, which is a regular schedule, which is important because when you're traveling, it's just, you do the best you can, but it's hard to get into that rhythm. So we're going to dive right in today and talk about effective delegation for perfectionists, something that both of us have a lot of experience in, both because we are perfectionists, and two, because we've had to learn how to delegate and how to do that well So we've talked to a lot of owners over the past several months as we've done this podcast. We've talked about things like setting core values and all of those things, and even writing SOPs, but how to truly delegate well, especially if you are a perfectionist, or especially if you have superhero complex, which most entrepreneurs do. And they're like, well, I can do it better than anybody else.
Yep.
Doing that really like at a tactical level in the trenches is much easier said than done.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I think a big part of this is how do you ultimately get to the point that you trust somebody, right? Like,
Sure.
I think delegation starts with trust.
Of course.
And you won't ever delegate something to someone that you don't trust can actually get the job done. And so I think all discussions of delegation start with a discussion about trust and how you develop it with your employees and your staff.
Yeah, interesting kind of bridge and excellent side note here is that in the next few weeks, we'll have my COO, Andrew Jackson, on to talk about what he calls the trust equation. It's his presentation that's kind of something that he has really owned in the business. And it's how we've taken our core values and the things we believe, and that when you have shared motivation and experiences and things that's like Andy Grove talks about in high output management, Andrew's really put this together on how that forms this collection of ideas, form trust between company and client, between employee and manager, between coworkers. I'll just say you've heard some of these stories before, that when I had to learn how to do this at Strong Gym, I've had to learn how to do this at a much greater level at Barbell Logic. And in the beginning, when you first start a business, you're typically a business of one, and you do everything. And the day comes where you are a bottleneck for the growth of your business. And so you have to learn how to delegate to other people. And so the question is, how do you start to do that? And so we have episodes on SOPs and writing those systems and standard operating procedures. I think those are the things that have to be done before the delegation occurs. I think the delegation itself, what I'd really like to talk about a lot today is how we train employees using those SOPs to build the trust to then actually give it away. I'll kind of lead in with that. And I don't know if you have a personal story there or any comments on that kind of overview of how I look at it.
Yeah, no, I think those things are right. You know, the thing about a well-structured SOP is that it should provide enough guidance for someone who is good at following the instructions, right?
Sure.
And I think the reality is that for most businesses, that's going to be a fair amount of the things that you need to get done, right? There's just a fair number of this thing happens, we do this. I think leaning back on some of the conversations we've had about like how do you delegate the things that maybe are a little bit resistant to the SOP, which means that they've fallen outside of a normal process. And I think that's where you really start needing to lean on this, what is the level of expertise of my employees and all of that kind of thing. So when you start the delegation process, it really should just be define the SOP, make it crystal clear what needs to be done. But in the process of defining the SOP, and I'm not sure we've actually talked about this in detail, I'm not sure how we missed it, but in the process of developing a SOP, you want to make sure that you also talk about what to do in the circumstance that the SOP is not working or it doesn't apply,
Sure.
or it's like a fail safe scenario, something like that. Because what you will find is that your ability to delegate and actually increase the amount of time that you have available to put your brain on important things is mostly about how much that SOP can apply and actually reduce the total amount of times people come to ask you questions.
Sure. There has to be some flexibility built in, right? And
Right,
so
right.
I think Andy Grove talks about this in his book as well. As first off, is like, why is this really necessary? Like, we can talk about it even from an ethereal point of view, obviously, like having a group of people with shared core values and with a shared mission is extremely important. We've got podcasts on that. But at a basic math level, like if we just use math, for every hour, for example, I'm leading the sales team right now. We have a sales team of 6. So we have 6 people on the sales team. And I'm doing this because I know how to sell and I've got a lot of experience there. But if I do all the sales, even if I'm selling 40 hours a week, which I'm not,
Yep.
I become a bottleneck for the company. Now, if I write the SOP and train my sales employees well, and then delegate that out to them and give them that responsibility. And the team is 6 people. Let's say it lands really well with 5 out of 6. Because honestly, most of the time it's not going to land well with 100% of the people. But let's say we get 80% or 85%, whatever, and it improves their ability to close by 50%, right? What I have effectively done, if I spend, say, 40 hours in a combination of, it shouldn't take me 40 hours to write the SOP. It takes 5 hours to write the SOP, or sometimes 2 hours, or sometimes less to write the SOP. And then let's say 40 hours total in training the employees, actually doing role playing on sales calls, things like that, to actually teach them how to do that. And it takes with 5 out of 6 and gets them 50% improvement in sales output. I'll gain somewhere in the ballpark in our business specifically of 25,000 additional output hours that I couldn't have given. So it is orders of magnitude higher, especially when you're able to delegate to not just a single person, but to train and delegate to multiple or teams of people,
Yeah.
which all of your managers should be doing and all your C-suite should be doing as well. And so from a basic math standpoint, you are no longer the bottleneck because you've trained people. Now, I also want to say this. I'm not great at this. I'm really good at writing SOPs and I'm really good at going over SOPs. But the thing that made Andy Grove so great, and we've talked about him before, CEO of Intel in their peak years, is that he was a great trainer of people. And my favorite type of person is when we hire from the inside someone who already understands the core values. I want to come back to that in a minute because I think there's another piece that's at play here, that they understand where we're going. I can give them the SOP and they can take the initiative and run because they already have the skill set.
Yeah.
And so that's the easiest way to do it. But that's not the most common way.
Yeah, no,
rare.
it's not extremely scalable, right? There's the other thing is like you can't scale from the inside forever. Like that
Correct.
just doesn't. I mean, the idea is just eventually you have to learn how to train people from the outside, from the ground up. Now you can bring them in at a level where you're not the one doing the training, so that you train the trainer. and the trainer begins doing the training,
Correct.
right? So lots of ways that you can sort of get to the point where you reach the level of scale that you want to reach. But I definitely think that for every business owner that is running into the issue of time management problems, like, I'm drowning, and I mean, we just had an episode where we were both like, holy
Right.
crap, like we're both drowning. For most people, it is just a delegation problem. It's just that you need to sit down and write the
Correct.
SOP. You are literally only so many hours of work away from
Sure.
actually being done with this problem. But it's the combination of the SOP and the training is going to take more time than you think.
It should take more time.
Oh yeah, you got a lot of this stuff in your head that the SOP may not capture. A lot of this stuff is around judgment. You've been in the business for a really, really long time, and you maybe assume some set of judgment that they're not going to have. And
Right.
so it takes time for people to see the way you work and the way that you respond to various things. I even think there's sort of a valuable master apprentice kind of relationship there where you can do it with not just one, but with multiples.
Yep.
You have to take regular breaks to explain, this is why I made this decision.
Yep.
In this circumstance. And then ideally, that's sort of informing the SOP further, right? Like you sort of try to institutionalize the things that are in your head around, why you made those choices.
Yeah, which always comes back to core values, and this is who we are, and this is why we made this decision. So, a couple other side notes here. Number one, the training of employees must be done by their direct report. You cannot hire this out. I can't hire out how to train, the VP of finance who's going to be the CFO. He reports to me. I'm the guy that trains him. And I've spent a lot of time this year training him. He's done a really great job. But if they direct report to me, I'm training them. And if they direct report to a level of my C-suite, that person on the C-suite trains them, right? And then can report up to me. But you can't delegate out the training. Right now, we can get lots of help with AI and other things in helping get the SOP written, but the training itself must come from the manager. So whoever that person direct reports to. So that's number one. Then the other thing is this. So I think really the foundation of this episode that we may come back to, because I think it makes a lot of sense in from a sort of systematic way, is that there is a delegation ladder. We've kind of touched all on these points, but to be clear, it really is levels of trust. And so the first level is do exactly what I say, or do exactly what the SOP says, right? And there are certain jobs like custodial type work that might literally be as far as it needs to go, because it's super, super simple. If you're running a retail store and you need somebody to stock shelves, just follow the list, right? There's rarely a real hard decision that has to be made. But then you get to the next level of trust, and it's, okay, do the research and then ask me questions that you might need help to get answers for. And that's level 2, which is, so now they're taking some ownership of that SOP. Then there is you have seen these places that you talked about where the SOP is not perfect, or this problem or this challenge doesn't fit into the SOP perfectly. That next step of trust is, give me the proposed solution. You ask the question, but you answer the question, the employee, the person that I'm managing, and you come to me with the challenge, the question you asked, and the proposed solution. And then we'll talk about it, and maybe we tweak a little bit, right? Step 4 is you make the decision and then tell me what you made. You make the decision. This is where you should be with your C-suite, by the way. Like, it's very rare that my C-suite, I had a great conversation yesterday with my CMO, and we were talking about some challenges, and I had some ideas, and I sent him kind of an idea sheet a few weeks ago. And the overarching challenges we totally agreed on, but how I would do it tactically, he was like, I think this is better. And I was like, that is better. And I trust you to make that. That's why you're the CMO and why I'm not the CMO, right? And then the last one is they own the outcome entirely. Right. And maybe at that point, these are C-suite level employees, COOs that have worked in the company long enough that you're like, you can just go. And I don't even need a ton of reporting from you. I want to know that progress is being made, but ultimately I trust you completely in your job to do your job, to handle all the challenges, to fix the situation. So we start with the follow the SOP exactly 100%. And as you gain trust and experience and shared experiences and cultural values and all those things, you eventually get to a place where, in a perfect scenario, that employee, manager, C suite, whatever, they can just do their job in a way where they never have to ask the questions, never have to get permission. They take initiative and ambition to do the thing. And you trust them entirely that the decision that they make is the same one that you'd make or better than the one that you would make.
And that's the primary difference. I mean, like what you end up with there usually is someone who owns some section of the P&L, which is to say the profit and loss statement. So you just, for people that are listening, there's a idea here that parts of your business might actually be, you might have a manager responsible for both the revenue and the expense side of that particular unit, whatever
Sure.
that is. This is sort of the company grows. When someone owns their whole section of the P&L, like you trust them a ton. Like that's
right.
They're driving, they're probably being paid also based on those numbers, the profitability of their P&L portion. The whole concept there is it has to get to a point where the decisions they make are better than the decisions you would make because they are more the expert than you are in that
Correct.
area by
That's
that point
exactly
in time. And that's it. I mean, that's the magic. It's where you want to get.
That's right. Now, let's take a step back because I know most of our listeners are not at a point where they have a C-suite. C-suite is like your team of top level executives, right? So chief, whatever, chief marketing officer, CTO, CIO, COO, all that sort of stuff. Most of our listeners are not going to have that, but they are starting to add employees. And now we may be in a position where we're not a company of one, we're a company of 5 or something, or 10 or whatever it is. And the two ways, again, that I remember that Andy Grove talks about, how do we do this well? How do we delegate well? Well, there's only 2 primary factors that really make this work and work well. And number 1 is that you can have increased motivation by your employees. If your employees are truly motivated, and there's different levels, there's self-interest, and there's motivation by pay or bonus. There's motivation by whatever the thing is, like they have stock options and they're trying to increase the value of the business. And then a lot of times it's just they're hyper motivated because they want to be successful in their job. They love the business. They have a shared mission, all of those sort of things. One of our primary jobs as owner, entrepreneur of a business, CEO, is to make sure that we are able to cast vision well and motivate our employees all the way from the C-suite down to the custodian, right?
Yep.
So improved motivation improves output. But also, once you get to the point that they're hyper motivated, you have to improve capability. It's a skill set. And this is the thing that you're really training. Now, I would argue that you're actually training on motivation as well. If you're not constantly talking about core values and our mission and where we're going and things like that, then you'll lose that. And if people are just, this is the difference between somebody who's a typical blue collar worker who just punches in and punches out. And again, some of those blue collar workers are making $150,000 a year and have, they clock out at 5 p.m. and they don't have any responsibility till the next morning they clock in. There's some value to that for sure. But for your employees, once they are hyper motivated, which is your job, the next job is you've got to make sure that they have the skill set needed to actually do the thing to get the output. And this is where the SOPs and the training and improving the capability. So I can have a hyper motivated sales team, and I think I do have a pretty hyper motivated sales team, and that's an ongoing conversation. But if they don't really know how to close, then it doesn't matter how motivated they are, the job doesn't get done. You can have a hyper motivated developer, but if they don't know the code base, they don't know how to write in code, whatever the thing is, you have to train them in that. And it's 99% of the time, it's more than just handing them the SOP. It's handing them the SOP and saying, now we're going to walk through the SOP and now we're going to do it together. And then we're going to explain the whys. And you're going to ask questions about, well, why do you do it this way? Well, here's why I do it this way. That's the training.
Yeah.
And so that training aspect, I don't know an exact percentage, but typically my guess is the writing or creating of the SOP is probably 10% to 20% max of the time spent. And 80 to 90% is then training the employees on that SOP, on that skill set.
And if you want like really, really solid, just easy to wrap your hands around idea of what that training looks like, it can be fairly straightforward on especially on a one-on-one basis, where you basically say, watch me do it,
Yep.
then you do it while I tell you what to do.
Yep.
And for most people, their hands are on the keyboard on the second one, if it's a
That's
computer
right.
kind of thing, and you're walking them through it. And in the third one, it's you do it and I'm not saying anything. At the end, we talk about it, right?
That's right. And then you build enough trust where you're like, I don't ever have to even see it because now I know that
Yep.
you can do the thing.
Yeah. There's one more step in there that I would normally have people do as well, is observe while they train somebody else.
Right.
A colleague, right?
Sure.
And that's not to say this doesn't go away from, I mean, you're also training that colleague. So it's not, you haven't gotten rid of that duty by telling somebody else to do it. But what you would do is say, look, this is just like classic classroom type stuff.
Sure.
When you teach something, you learn it better. Like that's just what it is.
When one teaches, two learn.
Yep, that's right.
That's the deal.
Yep. So you can use that same concept here and it works really, really well. One thing that I will mention, I think this is important for those of you that are in this position. Maybe you've been in this position multiple times and you've been frustrated because it doesn't seem like the people that you're putting in place are really actually lifting load from your plate. One of the things that I would say is there's a couple reasons that could be. One of them is that you may be the problem. Okay, so just be aware you might be the problem. It could be
so
that.
Can you go into that? Like in what ways do we see that?
Yeah. So the ways that we typically see this is you struggle with communication in general. So it's difficult for you to explain the things in your head out of your mouth.
You know how to do, but you don't know how to communicate to someone else how to do it.
And the second one that I see, but I probably see this a lot more frequently, is someone who gets really frustrated really fast.
Right.
So when you're teaching someone else a thing and they're not picking it up, they are sensing from you this rising temperature that's happening.
Sure.
Like, oh, it's getting more and more dangerous the more I don't get this right, which is making them even have a harder time figuring it out. So those are the two things I normally see when it's you.
Let me play on that second one for just a second, because I think that second one is directly related to what I would even say is like that second issue of like getting frustrated quickly as the teacher, as the master, is a perfectionism problem.
Yep.
It's because you are a perfectionist and you want it perfect. But you have to understand, you know, we've homeschooled our kids, and when you start teaching your kids math, it's single digit addition. You don't go to calculus. You can't, right? And so it's one step at a time. They are going to make mistakes. Now, one frustration that I've had in the past with my own daughters in teaching them is that they are quick to get frustrated. If the student is quick to get frustrated, this is where it comes back to the motivation piece. You have to learn how to. I do this all the time with my training clients, right? Like they're frustrated at themselves because they can't get the squat motion, movement, technique perfect. And I go, hey, you're doing great. Dude, let's go back 3 months and look at what your squat looked like 3 months ago. This is so much better. Like, yeah, we're always going to tweak. We're always going to, like, our aim is perfection. I've had to tell lots of clients, just so you know, I'm not frustrated. I know that I keep telling you to, stay on midfoot and not get on your toes, and you're struggling with that, but I can see that you're trying. So as long as I know that you're trying, I'm going to keep using tools in my tool bag to help you find that solution, that whatever that is that makes the light bulb go off. As the teacher, as the master, you have to be able to do that. But likewise, you also have to be able to motivate the student to say, like, it's okay to fail, because the greatest learnings are in the failures. They're not in the successes. And so you can celebrate the failures, and obviously there's times when, somebody's made a mistake in the business, there's times when I've made a mistake in the business where it cost the business $100,000. That's a little harder pill to swallow. But during the training of this stuff, like, oh, I screwed up the role playing on the sales team. Like, okay, that's why we're role playing, and it's not why we're not doing it with a real
learn it here.
Client here. And by the way, if you screw it up with a client, and this is the other thing that I'll do, is when I start to test this out with somebody like a sales team, I give them kind of a low ROI client, a low risk, low ROI, low return. I'm not going to give them a VIP client the first time they do it. So it's like, hey, if you fumble your words and you kind of like, it's okay. It will be okay. Right. And so that comes back to the motivation. So we have to be able to teach and communicate well. But we also have to be in a spot that we are continually motivating and encouraging during the teaching process and not getting frustrated because we are perfectionists. They will not be able to do it as well as you do in the
Yep.
beginning.
Yep.
If you
That's right.
teach well, by the end, they'll be better than you. That is the ultimate goal.
In some circumstances.
Yeah, that's true. But even if not, you talk about like, even if not, even if they're 80% of you and you have 10 employees that are 80% of you and all of those things, you have just by orders of magnitude
No
increased
question.
the output of the company.
There's also one more caveat that I feel like is an important one to hit. And all of those things are right. Like, look, most of the people that you would pick for a role, most of the people that would apply for the role are going to be the kind of people who want to be in that role, want to learn, want to become good at whatever they do, whatever. There is an occasional situation that I've seen, and sometimes it just emerges in an organization, depending on how things have gone, where you end up with people in the role that you either inherited or like whatever it is. Like, let's say that you acquire a business, right? Like in that situation, you're in an interesting situation because you didn't pick the people.
Sure.
And so when that happens, the one thing that you need to keep an eye out for is sometimes the person's in the wrong seat.
Correct.
Or they're the wrong person entirely, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
You cannot fix that. You cannot train that. And one of the things I want you to always keep in mind here is like, if you've crossed all the other things, if you're not getting frustrated, you're like perfectly calm, going through it, and you're motivating them. You're saying, "Hey, listen, it's totally okay. Like, we're supposed to be making mistakes now. That's how we learn, whatever." If all of that's going well and you're spending the right amount of time and you've worked on communication, made sure that's clear, and they don't get it, 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 they're the wrong person.
That's right.
And you will never fix it.
That's right.
There is one way to fix it, and that is to help them get another job that isn't that job.
The other example you gave is even more common. So I agree 100% that there are times that, and there's, by the way, it's an easy excuse to say, I bought the business and it came with these employees and there's going to be some employees that are wrong and I'm going to have to fire them. Because that's not really your fault in that situation. But the reality is I've hired the wrong employees before, as have you.
Oh, me too. Yeah, absolutely.
And you train them and you're like, I thought you had the potential for this and you don't. And so this is where, the old adage of hire slowly, fire quickly. So like once you know that the person's not the person, you get them out. And so I've had to do that. And the nice thing about that is that, and I think this should be authentic. Anytime I've had to fire somebody, I immediately I pretty much take the blame for it. Right.
Yep.
Now, there are times when, maybe an employee's done something heinous or something.
Right.
And so you fire them. And the main reason is like, listen, this thing was totally out of bounds. But ultimately, I will still almost always say like, hey, this is my company and I put you in position to do this. And that was obviously a mistake on my part. Like you take some role in, you have to. Internally, I take 100% of the responsibility in my brain.
Yep.
Even if they do something heinous, I'm like, well, then I hired somebody who would do something terrible in my company to hurt my company. And that's a me problem.
That's actually right. That's right.
Now, I may not go into that level of detail in the process of firing them because that's, not really what they want to hear. That needs, as a matter of fact, we probably need to do an episode on how to fire people because I can remember the first time I fired somebody and she cried in my office for 45 straight minutes. And then I called you and you're like, oh, you screwed that completely up. And you walked me. So we need to have that talk at some point.
Go watch Moneyball.
On a podcast. Yes, right. And so what will happen more often for me is you think you may give the person a promotion and because they're doing great at the job that they have. And so everybody wants to climb the ladder. And the only way to climb the ladder in your business and these corporations is to do exactly as you said. You train them on the skill set. They become masters at the skill set and they start to train others as well. And then they go from essentially employee to manager, to mid-level manager, to, upper manager, to executive, whatever. That's the way this works. But there are lots of times where I've put somebody in a position who is an excellent worker at this part of their position. But as I move them into the new position, I was like, oh, they're not good at this at all. And so, on a sales team, and by the way, if my sales team's listening, I'm not talking about anybody specifically here, but I've seen this happen before where they're just great people persons. That doesn't mean they're great at sales. I've
Yep.
had people on the sales team before that I'm like, oh, you shouldn't be on the sales team. You should be on the customer service team. You're a customer service person. And I've had customer service people that I'm like, listen, this person is a sales machine. They do a customer service call with a pissed off client, and the client comes back and makes an upgrade and they spend more money. I'm like, that person needs to be on the sales team. And my head of client experience, she's amazing at both. Like, she's one of the best I've ever seen at both customer service and sales, because she never sounds like a salesperson, because
Yep.
she genuinely cares about people and wants what's best for them. And often what's best for them is a higher level of service with the business. And so you just have to watch for that, as you want to be able to play to people's strengths. Where they're strong is, and where they can succeed best is where you want them in your business. Obviously, no matter who they are, from lowest level employee, custodian, all the way up to executives, there is a process of training and skill acquisition where they get better at their job. And so you want to be able to also think about not just, do they have the skill set today, but do they clearly have the potential to have the skill set in the short-term future?
Yeah,
And so
that's
this
right.
person is a great customer service person, but they need to be on the sales team, or vice versa. But they don't exactly know how to do sales yet. They're just great people persons. And I think they would be awesome at sales because they continue to accidentally do sales anyway. Then you're hiring on potential. Now, you might move them in that position and maybe they suck at sales. And so you're like, nope, back to customer service, right? And then sometimes you have the person who is just never motivated, no initiative, no ambition. And what it really comes down to is they don't have shared values or a shared mission. And when you have that person, it's not a move them around on the org chart. It's a get them out of the business.
In general, like I've made this mistake. I know you've had to have made this mistake. Move them around the business is normally not a good idea in general anyway.
Yep.
If you find yourself, and by like, if you get any advice from me at all and you think like, oh, like I should take this advice, this is it. Once you've moved somebody twice in the organization, that's it.
Yeah,
They're done.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
yeah, the movement should be upward, not lateral.
There are rare occurrences for lateral, but yes,
Correct.
in general, no.
Correct. There are times when you see that this person can absolutely fill this role and fill it well, and they're on one team and they need to move to another team. And often they'll move the other team and maybe manage the other team because they're so there's often an upward and lateral movement on the org chart. But typically lateral movement ain't great. And 2 lateral movements is 1 too many.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Most of the movement should be upward. And it may be up and over a little bit. There may be 5 degrees, 10 degrees of change, but it should typically come with some level of promotion because they are exceptional at this thing. And that should be something that's on that team that maybe they're not doing that exact thing. So it's not truly a lateral movement. It's a promotion in the team itself on that team. And yes, so yeah, I totally agree. I think 2 lateral movements is 1 too many.
Like, think about this for listeners that are, hearing this and going like, oh, like that's interesting. Like, okay, I'm gonna talk to you for a second. If you are moving someone around multiple times, or you keep shuffling them because they aren't making it in this role or the other, the actual problem is you're afraid to fire them. That's what's going on.
Yeah. So next week we'll do how to fire your first employee, which really still sucks. But okay, go ahead.
It is hard to fire someone. You're eventually going to have to do it. And if you move them multiple times, the problem is not them. The problem is you are afraid to fire them.
Correct.
They may be a great employee of some other business, but they're not a great employee of your business for whatever reason, right? And so I've always used those types of situations as an opportunity to say, look, I like you a lot, but the reality is I just can't find a fit here that makes any sense.
Right.
Let's see what we can do to find you another spot. So we'll dive into in more detail.
Save that for next week.
For next week.
I think there's a lot there in how to do that well and how to help them keep their dignity in it. And so we'll dive, because it's tough. And if you haven't, and this is something as an owner you should practice. And so anyway, we'll get into that next week. Okay, so any kind of closing thoughts there on things we haven't touched on that we need to touch on?
No, I think the only other thing that I'll say is as they rise in the organization, say they're good. We're off the track of the ones that are struggling, but they're good. Everyone will eventually hit the spot where they don't know enough, and they are going to need more training. When that happens, be sure in your organization that you've got opportunities for them to take on outside training that are outside of you, right? So
Yeah,
like
sure.
there are lots of opportunities for people to get better at these various roles, and that includes conferences and all that kind of stuff. But there's
Sure.
everyone's going to run into that problem too. And in small organizations, we probably at some point need to have the conversation about what does it mean when you scale an organization and you need to do this thing called top grading,
Yep.
which is something that people talk about all the time. It's a weird
Yep.
word that is used sometimes.
It's how we hire from the outside.
Yep.
It's how we do performance reviews from the inside.
Yep.
But it's
So maybe we do firing and then maybe we talk a little bit about top grading after that. So there's some idea what that looks like.
I would just say that my last wrap up point, Chris made the great point that if you're moving an employee around and you can't find a fit for them, they're just the wrong employee for the business. You got to let them go.
Yep.
And you're scared to fire them. But the other thing that I see is that more often, even or as often, is that the owner is scared to truly delegate. And so
absolutely. 100%.
where that will often present itself is you just keep working on the SOP forever, because it's easier to work on a piece of paper or a plan or, whatever, some instructions, than it is to actually give it away. And what I would say is much like has been adopted by the tech industry of minimum viable product of an MVP. You should have an MVP SOP. Do the best you can. But the SOP should not take you 10, 20 hours to write. Get the MVP SOP out and delegate it and start training right then.
Yep.
And what you really need is the first step of that SOP to be pretty tight, and teach them and train them on the first step and let them ask the questions. And that will help inform step 2. And so I don't think you should go into it with just step 1 of the SOP. I think you should have a basic outline, but the SOP can actually be just an outline in the beginning. And you continue to fill it over time. It's a living document. And so start delegating today. Don't spend all your time. Don't spend the next 6 months or a year writing SOPs and doing no delegation. Get the outline of the SOP written, delegate, and start training right now. And then as you're training them, you'll make additions to the SOP, but you also give them opportunities to make additions to the SOP, which also is a great tester that they're actually understanding the skill set needed for the job. Yep. They start to see the holes in the SOP or places where steps need to be added or taken away or changed in chronological order. You give them opportunity for that. And this is why something like as simple as a Google Doc is so great, because you can have multiple people making changes at the same time, while also if they make a change that you hate, you can go back to the history and you can go to the version history and go like, oh, let's go back 2 versions and clean this up. You can also give them, rather than editing rights, you can give them suggesting, so they can just make the suggestions like delete this sentence and add this sentence, and then you can accept it. So those are all, again, parts of the trust equation where it's like, how much do you trust them to write the SOP, to actually make the edits and make the changes? In the beginning, it may just be like, make comments and make suggestions, and we'll talk through it on the next call. Last part of this is this. The training, if you don't do this, you're not going to train them. The training needs to be scheduled and reliable. So they need to know that it's coming, right? Not just like, oh, we're putting out a fire because the sales team sucks right now. Again, I'm not talking to my sales team, using that as an example, but like, hey, this part of the business isn't working, so we're going to start doing some training there. No. Training should have been happening all along with the team. And so those things need to be regularly scheduled. And, there are times when you'll get to a point as you build trust where it doesn't have to be weekly, and it doesn't even have to be bi-weekly. Like maybe it's monthly, or maybe they know that once a month, a standing stand-up meeting all the time is not always good. And sometimes it's a time waster. Yep. But in the beginning of training, I think it's excellent because they need to know it's coming. It'll give them an opportunity to brush up on things a little bit, just like you would, back when you were in college and you were studying. You knew a test was coming on Friday. On Thursday and on Friday morning, like I would often get to school an hour early and sit in my car and do one last hour of studying. So everything was super fresh in my brain, and then go in. Good employees will do the same thing with the training. And so they need to know it's coming and not just surprise them out of the blue on occasion, whatever. And so that's one of the things that, again, I'm not great at with the sales team as I've continued to write the SOPs, and a lot of stuff has changed and AI is changing the way the SOPs are, that we're trying to get on a good schedule of training my sales team. And then I also have the issue that you also probably have. I've got 2 members of my sales team. They're in the UK. right? I've got one that works a regular day job and then works in the evenings and on the weekends for us. And so finding the time to do that, because again, I'm trying to get orders of magnitude of output. I don't want to train each sales member individually. There will be some of that, especially with the ones that are struggling with certain pieces of this. But as much as I can do in the group, if I can train 6 people at once or 10 people at once, I get 10x on my time. And so sometimes that can be a challenge as well, but work around it and figure out a way to do that. For me, I'm pretty hardlined on my schedule for my sales team. As I've gotten back from vacation, I said, hey, you guys tell me when you're available and I'll make sure I'm available. If I need to do an evening, which I normally don't work, if I need to do a Saturday morning, which I normally, I'm not going to typically do that. I'm like, I'll do it because it's that important to the team. We've got to start this training. So start delegating today. Don't be scared to delegate and train. Write the SOP, delegate, train. And also don't be scared to fire. Yep. If it's the wrong person, fire them. And we'll talk about that next week on how to do that well, both from the perspective of the boss and the perspective of the employee. That can be done. Yep. There are good ways to do this and poor ways to do this. If you do it poorly, you'll ruin a relationship forever. If you do it well, my experience is 80 to 90% of the people that I think I have fired well, I still have excellent relationships with today. Like there's some sting. There's some sting. There always is.
Yeah.
But time heals the wound. And then a few months later, they reach out on, Instagram or send me an email or something like that. And, thank me and update me on their new job and they're doing great. And I'm genuinely happy for them. I want that to be the case. So
yep, definitely.
That's it. All good?
All good.
Awesome. That's another episode of the Build Your Business podcast. Thank you so much for listening, catching us this Friday. I'm home for a while, so I'm good to keep recording. We should be able to come out with new episodes. I thank you for being patient with us when we have to do a re-release with life's just been crazy with business ownership over the last couple months, and things are starting to slow down. So we should be able to get these out fresh and new every Friday for you. And so we'll see you guys next Friday. Teach you how to fire somebody. Have a great weekend and a great week, everybody. We'll see you next Friday.